You come to Rome with a wrong picture in your head. Not the Rome of heat and flies and wet stone, but the polished version. Marble gods, cold fountains, silver water pouring from carved mouths into clean basins. A city so proud of its aqueducts that it seems to believe thirst itself has been conquered. You imagine relief. You imagine the first mouthful sliding down your throat like proof that civilization works. Instead, the water tastes of metal, lime, and something flat that clings to the tongue. It is not always foul. That is what makes it worse. It can look clear in the morning light. It can flash like glass. It can feel cold enough to trick you into trust. Then you notice the basin rim darkened by countless hands, the green smear where dampness never dries, the bucket rope shiny from sweat and grime, the mule splashing nearby, the child coughing into the same open space where people fill their jugs. You drink because the day is already hot, and because not drinking is not an option. Rome is full of noise that dries you out. Sandaled feet scraping stone, vendors shouting over fish, onions, lentils and oil, teamsters swearing at wagons jammed axle to axle. The air itself feels used. Dust sticks to your lips. Your skin salts over. You reach for water again, not with confidence now, but with the dull understanding that survival begins with accepting what frightens you. All around you, the city runs on water. It pours into baths, kitchens, workshops, gutters, fountains and latrines. It softens bread, rinses knives, wets mortar, carries waste, cools the wealthy, and pools beneath the poor. It is everywhere. And that is the problem, because once water enters everything, everything can enter the water. By the first hour, you understand the cruel joke. Rome's greatest boast is also the thing you cannot escape. The city offers you a drink with one hand and sickness with the other. You are thirsty in the wrong place, in a city that worships flow, yet cannot keep its own lifeblood clean. You learn very quickly that in Rome, water is never just water. It is a crowd. It is a queue. It is a struggle of elbows, jars, curses, and waiting. The city's population presses against itself from dawn onward, and every part of daily life forces you into shared contact with surfaces that never stay clean for long. The fountain where you fill a jug is also where laundry is rinsed. Vegetables are washed, hands are dipped, and gossip settles in thick little circles of breath above the basin. Even when the flow is constant, the stone lip is slick with use. You place your fingers where a butcher placed his, a laborer with cracked nails, a child wiping mucus from his face, a woman carrying fish scraps in a basket damp enough to drip onto your sandal. The streets do not give you room to stay apart. Insular apartments pack families upward into narrow, airless stories, where water must be carried in buckets up dark stairways and stored in whatever vessel will hold it. Inside these cramped rooms, there is no elegant separation between clean and dirty. The same corner may hold cooking pots, washing bowls, chamber vessels, damp clothes, and sleeping mats. Spilled water darkens the floor and never quite loses the smell of feet, ash, and old food. In summer, everything grows sour faster. In winter, it simply stays wet longer. The markets are worse in their own way because they seem normal. That is what makes them dangerous. Rome's food economy depends on movement. Fish laid out on slabs, greens sprinkled to keep them fresh, wines diluted, cheese softened, sausages hanging over packed aisles buzzing with flies. Money passes from hand to hand. So do ladles, baskets, knives, and cups. A vendor wets cloth to wipe a counter, then uses the same cloth again and again until it no longer cleans anything, only smears the city more evenly across the wood. You cannot simply withdraw from this. Most people cannot. Water must be fetched. Meals must be made. Work must be done. Artisans need it for dyeing, tanning, plastering, and metalwork. Bakers need it for dough. Public baths attract the poor and wealthy alike because cleanliness, status, and social life all meet there, however uneasily. Servants carry water for households that cannot function without it. Laborers drink where they can. Carters stop at troughs. Animals drink nearby. And their waste never stays far from human use. Even the idea of escape belongs mostly to fantasy. Rome feeds itself by density and routine. If you are poor, you live where work is. If you work, you go where other people gather. If you do not go, you do not eat. So you keep touching the rope, the cup, the jar handle, the basin edge, the wet door latch, the market board, the bath step. The city does not ask whether you feel safe. It asks whether you can carry one more load, stand in one more line, swallow one more risk. By the time hunger arrives, you understand that food in Rome is only partly about appetite. It is about calculation. What can be bought before it spoils? What can be softened enough to chew? What can be stretched with water, oil, vinegar, or broth so the body keeps moving? Survival does not come plated in abundance. It comes in bowls, crusts, ladles, and cups that have passed through too many hands. Your bread is the first lesson. It looks harmless, even comforting, dense, warm if you are lucky. Sometimes coarse enough to scrape the gums. But bread depends on flour stored in places where damp creeps in. Vermin feed freely, and sacks absorb whatever the air gives them. Grain can sour. Milling can introduce grit that cracks the teeth. The dough is mixed with water that may have come from a fountain, a cistern, or a storage jar scrubbed less often than anyone admits. Then it is kneaded by hands already busy since dawn, hands that have handled coins, baskets, animals, door bars, and chamber vessels. You dip that bread into stew because dry bread alone is punishment. The stew helps, but it brings its own quiet dangers. A pot hangs over heat all day as ingredients are added when they become available. Beans, onions, cabbage, scraps of meat, fish sauce, herbs, stale wine, old oil. The smell is rich enough to reassure you. But a pot that lingers too long between boiling and cooling can turn from nourishment to invitation. Storage is never perfect. Lids do not seal the way you hope. Flies find their way in. Dust settles. A servant tastes with one spoon and stirs with another, or perhaps the same one. Hunger makes people generous with belief. Then there is the drinking itself. Rome offers fountain water, but also watered wine, sour wine, posca for soldiers and workers, and the occasional cup of ale where local habits allow it. None of these drinks frees you from risk. Water may be drawn fresh, yet still pick up contamination from a poorly kept basin or a vessel that stands too long in a warm room. Wine feels safer because fermentation has done some of the work, and diluted wine has long been trusted by those who know plain water can betray you. But once it is mixed, poured, or shared, safety becomes a matter of degree, not certainty. A cup is rinsed in cloudy water and passed on. A jug sits open, a ladle falls, is lifted, and used anyway. The body does not get to insist on ideal conditions. Storage jars create another layer of uncertainty. Amphorae and household vessels hold water, oil, garum, wine, grain, and preserved foods. But containers are only as clean as the people reusing them. Sediment gathers at the bottom. Glazed surfaces crack. Open mouths invite dust, insects, and fingers. Cistern water can taste stale and earthy, with a coolness that masks how long it has sat. Even well-built systems are vulnerable once daily life takes over, because a city can move water brilliantly and still fail to protect it after arrival. You keep eating. You keep drinking, not because the risks are hidden from you, but because they are built into the ordinary act of staying alive. An empty stomach weakens you. Dehydration makes you stupid, slow, and easy to break. So you choose the stew, the bread, the cup, the basin, the refill. Rome does not force poison on you in a dramatic instant. It asks you to live normally inside conditions that grind safety down into something thin, uncertain, and never quite enough. Once fear settles in, you start looking for rituals. Not truth, not certainty, just habits that make danger feel smaller. Rome gives you plenty of them. It is a city proud of order, drains, aqueducts, baths, and physicians with opinions on everything from digestion to damp air. That pride can feel comforting. If a civilization can move water across valleys and arches, surely it can tell you how to stay safe from what rides inside that water. So you begin where Romans often begin, with cleanliness. The public baths promise relief from heat, grime, and fatigue. You enter sweating and leave scraped, oiled, rinsed, and briefly convinced you have done something wise. The warm rooms loosen the body. The steam softens dirt. The strigil peels away sweat and skin in grey ribbons that seem to prove filth can be removed by force. But baths are still shared spaces. Bodies crowd the pools. Water is reused, refreshed imperfectly, and surrounded by stone slick with oil, spit, and the residue of many strangers. A place built to display civilization can also circulate whatever civilization carries. That does not mean Romans were ignorant or uniquely filthy. Quite the opposite. They washed more often than many people later imagined, cared deeply about grooming, and understood that stagnant foulness was unhealthy. The problem is not that nobody valued hygiene. The problem is that hygiene had limits inside a crowded city where infrastructure was uneven. Storage was flawed, and the same water served too many purposes. Cleanliness could reduce visible grime without removing what you could not see. Medicine adds another layer of confidence and confusion. If your stomach cramps, if fever takes hold, if your mouth dries while your bowels empty faster than your strength can recover, someone has an explanation. Perhaps the balance of humors has shifted. Perhaps heat has overwhelmed the body. Perhaps bad air, foul vapors, or rotting matter have disturbed the lungs and blood. These ideas do not come from stupidity. They come from observation filtered through a world that lacks microbes but notices patterns. Marshes smell dangerous. Rot feels dangerous. Crowded air seems to thicken disease. In a limited way, some of those instincts point toward real risk, but the remedies they produce can fail you badly. A physician may advise purging, vomiting, or bloodletting to restore balance. This sounds active, even disciplined. It feels like doing battle against the illness. But if you are already weakened by dehydration or intestinal disease, losing more fluid or blood can push you closer to collapse. Herbal mixtures might soothe the stomach or calm pain, yet they can also do very little against contaminated water itself. Vinegar is praised. So are bitter infusions, poultices, oils, and mineral compounds. Some help symptoms. Some merely coat misery in the taste of medicine. Then there are household protections, the smaller acts that people trust because they can be repeated. Boiling when fuel allows, mixing wine with water, covering jars, burning aromatics to sweeten the air, hanging charms, invoking household gods for protection over food, children, and the threshold. None of this is absurd when you live with uncertainty every day. Ritual creates the feeling of control, and feeling matters when the city can poison you in ways too ordinary to notice. The dark irony is that Rome's smartest habits and deepest beliefs can only guard you part way. A scrubbed skin does not mean a clean cup. A fragrant room does not mean safe water. A respected physician can name your suffering, and still not stop it. The city offers remedies, routines, and impressive engineering, but they often defend appearance better than vulnerability. You come away washed, treated, advised, and no less exposed to the simple act that keeps you alive, drinking what Rome gives you. The real danger does not announce itself with drama. It arrives in ordinary gestures. A cup lowered into a basin, a storage jar opened in a dim room, a cook wetting hands before kneading dough, a child splashing at the edge of a fountain, a drain backing up after heavy use, a cracked pipe or fouled cistern doing its quiet work while the city continues to praise its own brilliance. Death in Rome often moves like administration, through channels, through systems, through the expectation that what served yesterday will serve again today. You live inside an empire that understood hydraulic movement far better than biological contamination. Aqueducts carried vast volumes of water over long distances with astonishing skill. But the journey did not end at the aqueduct. Water entered the city and met people, animals, basins, baths, kitchens, laundry, workshops, and waste. Once it reached that level, perfection dissolved. Public fountains might flow steadily, yet their surroundings could still be polluted by runoff, dirty vessels, or hands that had touched everything else in Roman life. Cisterns could become stale or fouled. Wells could suffer from seepage. Household storage added warmth, time, and carelessness. The danger was not one single poisoned source. It was the city's ability to spread small failures across a huge population. The body often notices too late. At first, you feel only thirst, then discomfort, a turning stomach, a strange heaviness after drinking, a cramp that makes you pause and press a hand below the ribs. You tell yourself it is heat or bad luck or too much work. Then comes the sharper pain, gurgling bowels, sudden urgency, weakness in the legs, sweat that beads and chills at the same time. If the illness takes the gut, your body starts emptying itself with cruel determination. Water leaves faster than you can replace it. The mouth dries. The tongue thickens. Your thoughts lose their edge. A city built on flowing water watches you die of losing too much of it. Sometimes the danger works slower. Persistent contamination, heavy mineral loads, metal exposure from certain pipes or vessels, and the general burden of urban filth do not always strike like lightning. They grind, they inflame, they weaken, they make the body less resilient against every other insult. That is one of the harsh truths about ancient survival. A dramatic illness gets remembered, but chronic stress kills quietly by making recovery harder. A laborer already underfed, already exhausted, already living in damp air and shared quarters, does not need a theatrical poisoning. He only needs one more burden than his body can bear. Water also moves danger through contact. Wet cloths wipe surfaces and spread residue. Bath attendants handle tools and bodies in sequence. Communal basins invite rinsing without true separation. Laundry can carry the smell of cleanliness while keeping the memory of contamination in its fibers. Bedding absorbs sweat, vomit, and other bodily fluids, then waits for the next sleeper. In hot weather, dampness becomes a breeding ground for insects and rot. In poorer districts, runoff mixes with refuse in alleys where children play and carts grind mud into paste. Rome had drains, yes, but drains are not magic. A drain can carry filth away only after filth has already been present. Then there is sewage, the thing polite admiration of Roman engineering likes to keep at a distance. The city built impressive systems for drainage and waste removal, but not everyone was equally protected by them, and not every waste stream stayed neatly separated from daily life. Latrines flushed into channels. Street runoff carried organic waste. Overflow happened. Leakage happened. Human confidence in infrastructure has always outrun infrastructure itself. You smell it in warm weather when sour. Fecal air rises from openings in the street. You see it where moisture darkens walls and trickles through places no clean water should travel. The line between managed waste and shared environment is thinner than marble propaganda suggests. A wealthy Roman could reduce some risks with private supply, better storage, cleaner servants, and more spacious living. But even privilege had limits. Servants still fetched and handled water. Food still passed through markets. Pipes still aged. Baths still mixed classes in ways that made status less important than exposure. The poor suffered most brutally because they had fewer choices. But the city's system never truly allowed purity. It offered gradations of vulnerability, not escape. And when sickness spreads widely, fear changes what people notice. Suddenly, every cup seems suspect. Every fountain basin looks too green, too crowded, too touched. Mothers inspect their children's lips after drinking. Shopkeepers swear their jars are clean. Physicians argue. Priests bless. Neighbors whisper that a certain street, bath, or vendor is cursed. Yet the threat remains difficult to pin down because it is not a single monstrous event. It is embedded in the city's normal metabolism. Water softens bread, fills baths, cools skin, carries waste, rinses blood from butcher slabs, and glitters beautifully in the sun while doing all of it. That is the deepest horror. Rome's lifeblood does not need to be visibly foul to betray you. It only needs to pass through too many human hands, too many cracked surfaces, too many warm rooms, too many systems that were impressive enough to inspire trust and flawed enough to punish it. You do not face death by refusing civilization. You face it by depending on it exactly as intended after a while. The worst part is not the taste, not the cramps, not even the fear of the next cup. It is what suspicion does to your mind. Water is supposed to quiet panic. It is supposed to cool the body, soften food, wash the skin, and make a crowded life bearable. In Rome, it can become the thing that makes every ordinary moment feel negotiable. You hesitate before drinking. You watch who touched the jug. You notice stains, odors, damp corners, and the habits of other people with a sharpness that begins to feel cruel. Trust shrinks first inside the home. A shared bowl on the table no longer feels innocent. A child sent to fetch water returns with a sloshing vessel, and you wonder whether the rim brushed a dirty basin, whether the cup used for tasting was properly rinsed, whether the hands carrying it home paused on a stair rail slick with the touch of neighbors. If someone falls ill, family affection collides with self-preservation. You want to tend them, cool their face, clean their bedding, help them swallow. But each act of care now carries an ugly calculation. Love is forced to measure itself against fear. The poor feel this pressure most brutally because privacy is a luxury. In crowded apartments, one person's sickness becomes everybody's atmosphere. A bowl used for washing may be needed moments later for cooking. Wet cloths hang in the same room where people sleep. Children lie close to coughing adults because there is nowhere else to put them. Laborers cannot afford caution that keeps them from work. Women managing households must keep water moving through the day whether they trust it or not. Caregivers handle the consequences directly, carrying the soaked cloth, the fouled vessel, the chamber pot, the child too weak to stand. Children suffer in a different way because they do not understand the scale of risk. They reach where adults hesitate. They play near troughs, fountains, gutters, and wet stone because water still looks like relief to them. The old suffer because weakness turns every stomach illness into a more serious threat. The poor suffer because storage is worse, rooms are smaller, and escape is imaginary. Enslaved people and servants suffer because they handle the city's water for others while having little control over what they themselves must drink. What disappears first is the simple feeling of safety and routine. A drink is not just a drink. Washing is not just washing. Feeding a child is not just feeding a child. The city trains you to keep living, keep carrying, keep serving, keep swallowing, even when confidence is gone. That strain leaves marks no physician can easily treat. You become more alert, more irritable, more suspicious, and more alone, even while pressed shoulder to shoulder with thousands of others. Rome remains crowded, noisy, and full of movement. But inwardly, the world has narrowed to one anxious question repeated all day long. Can this hurt me too? In the end, what defeats you is not some grand collapse of Roman civilization. The arches still stand, the fountains still run, the baths still steam. Officials still admire the systems that make the capital seem immortal. That is what makes the truth so unsettling. A city can be magnificent and still fail at the level of the human mouth, the human stomach, the human hand reaching for a cup. Rome changed the ancient world by mastering movement. Roads moved armies, ports moved grain, aqueducts moved water with a confidence few societies could match. But movement is never neutral. The same urban density and engineering that made the city powerful also made it vulnerable to its own scale. Water connected everything. That gave life to Rome. Yet it also meant that weakness in one corner could travel outward through habit, contact, and daily need. You were protected by stone, planning, and flow only up to the point where reality entered the system. What remains with you is not simply fear of thirst. It is a deeper recognition that survival in the ancient city depended on endurance and luck as much as design. Some people had better odds because they had more space, better storage, stronger bodies, or servants to absorb the ugliest labor. Many did not. For them, resilience was practical and unsentimental. Carry the jar. Boil when possible. Trust the wrong thing and hope it is not fatal. Recover if the body can. Continue if it cannot fully heal. Rome's water reveals something larger than contamination. It reveals how often people mistake sophistication for safety. Marble, pipes, drains, and public order can hide fragility without removing it. Under all the engineering, the body remains painfully simple. It needs clean drink, tolerable food, and just enough security to recover from strain. Deny those for long enough, and even the greatest city in the world becomes a place where survival feels improvised. So the haunting lesson is not that Rome lacked genius. It is that genius had limits, and your body paid for them. You bend over the basin, drink because you must, and discover that civilization can glitter on the surface, while danger waits in the most necessary thing on earth.